7 signs your spiritual awakening is over. It's time to use your powers. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. In today's video on spiritual wisdom, we explore what it truly means when your spiritual awakening has completed, and more importantly, how to step into your next chapter with clarity and purpose. If you've been feeling a shift within, like you're no longer just awakening, but being called to act on your inner growth, this message is for you. These 7 signs will help you recognize when it's time to stop seeking and start living your power. What part of your awakening journey are you in right now? Let us know in the comments. Your insight could inspire someone else on their path. Sign 1. You no longer feel separate from the universe. You no longer feel like an outsider, disconnected from the flow of life or cut off from something greater. That feeling of separation, once so heavy and defining, has quietly melted away. You're not fighting the world anymore. You're part of it. You've stopped resisting change because deep down, you now trust that everything unfolds exactly as it should. This isn't just acceptance, it's alignment. It's what Carl Jung called individuation, the realization that what you were searching for was never outside of you. It was always within, waiting to be remembered. The illusion of separation between you and nature, between you and others, between you and the divine has dissolved. You sense the unity behind all things. A tree is no longer just a tree. A stranger's eyes are no longer empty. A difficult moment is no longer meaningless. Everything is speaking, and now you have the ears to hear it. There's a calmness in you that wasn't there before. You don't need to control the outcome because you feel guided by something deeper than logic, by rhythm, by intuition, by a sacred intelligence moving through all things, including you. Carl Jung believed that wholeness arises when we integrate all the hidden parts of ourselves, not when we deny or escape them. That process has happened to you. You've sat with your pain. You've faced your confusion. You've embraced your light and your shadow. And something incredible has happened in return. You've come home to yourself. That home isn't a place. It's a way of being, a way of seeing. It's the moment you realize that the universe isn't out there. It's here, and it's always been. In everyday life, this shows up in small but powerful ways. You stop rushing. You start listening. You become more present with people, even when they're hurting or triggering. You don't take things so personally anymore because you see the bigger picture. Even in chaos, you hold your center. Even in silence, you feel full. Your identity is no longer built on roles, labels, or outcomes. It's rooted in presence. You've stopped trying to become someone, and you've started being yourself, fully and unapologetically. This shift is not just a spiritual idea, it's a lived transformation. A woman once shared that after years of trying to fix her life, something changed. She stopped forcing answers and started paying attention to the stillness. One afternoon, sitting alone, she felt everything around her, trees, wind, and light suddenly come alive. Not through words, but through being. She realized she wasn't alone, never had been. That moment wasn't dramatic, but it changed everything. That's what it's like when the separation fades. You stop asking for signs and start living as the sign. You've reached the point where your awakening is no longer about seeking. It's about embodying. You carry the spiritual wisdom of someone who has returned from the depths, not with noise, but with knowing. You've stopped needing to be chosen. because you know you were. And now, it's time to use what you've become. Are you starting to feel deeply connected to the universe and all that is? If this resonates with you, comment below. I am one with the universe to affirm your spiritual awakening and inspire others to embrace their divine connection too. Let's grow together. Sign 2. Your intuition guides you without doubt. You no longer need to ask for a sign. You no longer need to overthink your feelings or seek confirmation from 10 different people. Your intuition has become the loudest voice in the room, and for the first time in your life, you trust it without hesitation. You don't question where it comes from or what it means. It speaks, and you follow. This is no longer a guess. It's guidance. This isn't hope. It's clarity. You feel the decision before you can explain it, and you know it's right without needing to justify it. This is spiritual wisdom taking the wheel, subtle, precise, and powerful. There was a time when you needed validation. You wanted someone to tell you you were on the right path, to give you permission to feel what you were already feeling deep inside. But now, you don't need to ask. You just know. You've stopped asking the universe to speak louder, because now you've quieted the noise within. You've made enough mistakes, followed enough wrong turns, and sat in enough silence to know what your soul sounds like, and now you listen. You no longer chase signs because you are the sign. You've become the confirmation you once sought outside of yourself. That's when the shift becomes clear. Your awakening is no longer something you're working through. It's who you are now. And when decisions come, you don't hesitate. You don't consult 5 opinions. You don't wait for everything to be perfect or fully understood. You act not impulsively, but intuitively. You feel the pull and you follow it. You walk through doors others are still analyzing. And this isn't recklessness, it's alignment. You don't need logic to back it up anymore. You move with the rhythm of your spirit. And in that rhythm, there's no fear. There's only knowing. Before, you were always learning, watching, searching. You needed spiritual books, podcasts, courses because you were still remembering who you are. But now, you live what you used to study. You walk as what you once admired. You speak from a place of experience, not theory. And that's what spiritual wisdom is, not information, but embodiment. You've stopped talking about the path. Now you are the path. Your intuition isn't just a feeling anymore. It's a system, a guidance structure that your life runs on. You make decisions without panic. You feel peace in your boundaries. You no longer explain your energy to people who don't understand it. Your life has become a reflection of your inner knowing, and that knowing is crystal clear. You've stopped performing for the world because you've already been approved by something higher. You no longer wait for the green light. You are the green light. Even your timing has changed. You no longer force things to happen. You trust when things pause, when doors close, when silence stretches longer than expected. You recognize the divine rhythm at work, and you don't need to rush it because you're in sync with something deeper. The void no longer scares you, it steadies you. The uncertainty no longer shakes you, it sharpens you. You're not just spiritually curious anymore. You're spiritually calibrated. Now, your yes is rooted in alignment. Your no comes from clarity, not guilt. You don't need long explanations or drawn-out apologies. You're not here to convince anyone, you're here to follow the truth. And that truth speaks through your intuition, clear and constant, like a compass that never wavers. Every moment, every choice, every shift in direction, it's all coming from within. There's no fear in that, only power. And this power doesn't shout, it doesn't need to. It simply is. You carry it in how you move, how you speak, how you choose. This is the sign that your spiritual awakening is over. When you no longer search for alignment, you are alignment. Your intuition has become your lifestyle. Your choices are made in wholeness, not in doubt. And your life, slowly and steadily, becomes a mirror of your soul's deepest truth. That is the gift of spiritual wisdom, and now it lives in you. If you're ready to trust your inner guidance and follow your intuition with clarity and confidence, comment below. I follow my inner voice. Let this be your declaration that you no longer seek outside approval. Your soul already knows the way. Sign 3. Material desires no longer control you. You no longer crave the shiny symbols of success that once held power over you. The chase for wealth, the desire to accumulate more, the longing for titles, praise, and possessions they've lost their grip. What once felt urgent now feels empty. You've looked behind the curtain of materialism and seen that it was never the destination. It was a distraction. What you want now cannot be held in your hands, but must be felt in your soul. Peace, purpose, and deep inner alignment. This is not detachment out of defeat. This is the kind of clarity that only arrives after the storm of longing has passed. You no longer measure your value by your bank account, your home, or your appearance. Instead, you measure it by how quiet your mind is when you're alone, how full your heart is when you give, and how aligned you feel when you speak your truth. Your old self used to hustle for validation, but your awakened self moves with quiet confidence. Your needs are no longer fueled by scarcity, but by sacredness. You no longer grasp, you allow. You no longer chase, you attract. And the shift is so powerful, it's almost invisible, yet your entire life feels lighter because of it. Abundance still flows to you, but the desperation is gone. There's no more begging, forcing, or proving. Now, abundance comes to you like a trusted friend, gently, consistently, and without resistance. You've realized that spiritual awakening doesn't mean rejecting money or success. It means refusing to let them define you. You no longer build your self-worth on things that can be taken away. You've rooted your worth in something eternal, your divine essence, your mission, your presence. You're no longer interested in proving anything to anyone. What once felt like ambition now feels like noise. Your soul has taken the lead. Your desires have been refined. You only move if it's in alignment. You only say yes if your spirit agrees. And that alignment has made you magnetic not just to people, but to opportunities, blessings, synchronicities. What once required exhausting effort now flows with grace. Because your energy is clean, your intentions are clear, your heart is open, and your hands are steady. As Carl Jung said, who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. You've done the inner work. You've healed the need to be seen and replaced it with the power to see clearly. You've traded applause for peace, comparison for compassion, and approval for authenticity. Your life is no longer about getting more, but about becoming more. And that shift, that's not just growth, that's power. If this message resonates with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep evolving together. Sign number 4 is waiting for you. Sign 4. You have embraced solitude and peace. You no longer fear being alone because you've come to realize that solitude is not a punishment, it's a gift. The moment you stopped chasing noise and started cherishing silence was the moment your awakening matured. You began to understand what Carl Jung meant when he said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that matter." Now, your soul no longer aches for constant company. It craves peace, stillness, and presence. You have stopped filling the silence with distractions and started letting it speak to you. Spiritual awakening isn't just about realizing universal truths. It's about learning to enjoy your own company in a world that tries to make you forget who you are without others. You no longer measure your worth by how many people call, text, or notice you. You've stopped performing for attention and started protecting your energy like it's sacred. You've learned that not everyone deserves access to you, and that peace is not found in a crowd. It's found in alignment with your higher self. That's why shallow relationships no longer satisfy you. They feel too small, too loud, too disconnected from the depth your soul has awakened to. You begin to crave conversations that stretch your mind, not just pass the time. You're no longer afraid to walk away from people who can't meet you there. This isn't arrogance, it's evolution. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing yourself so deeply that you no longer negotiate your peace for temporary company. The void that once made you feel lonely now feels full because you filled it with self-respect, awareness, and truth. You've discovered the paradox that in silence, you are not alone. You are most connected. You start to notice how the world praises extroversion, but forgets that all transformation happens in the quiet. You don't need constant validation or stimulation anymore. You choose nights with yourself over draining events. You journal instead of overshare. You take walks to reconnect with your center rather than scroll endlessly for meaning. You find that when your energy is aligned, solitude becomes your sanctuary. It's not isolation, it's inner integration. Carl Jung believed that the process of individuation, of becoming whole, required retreating from the collective, confronting your own shadow, and learning to live from the center of your being. And that is exactly what you're doing. You are not waiting for someone else to complete you. You're not chasing after shallow conversations just to feel seen. You have become the one who sees yourself fully, and that's power. You no longer feel guilty for choosing peace. You protect your space, your time, and your heart because you understand that not everyone is meant to walk with you in this chapter. This isn't about being alone. It's about being in alignment. It's not about isolation. It's about insulation from noise that distorts your truth. Silence no longer signals emptiness. It signals readiness, depth, power. This is where the real transformation happens, not in the chaos, but in the calm. And now, you finally understand that. Do you feel this deep shift within you? If you've embraced solitude and found peace in your own presence, declare it boldly in the comments. I protect my peace and walk in divine stillness. Sign 5. You naturally attract people who need your light. You no longer need to announce your presence or explain your journey. People feel it. They are drawn to you, not because of your words, but because of your steady, grounded, and healing energy. Even without trying, you've become a lighthouse in the storm for those still lost in confusion. Strangers start conversations. Friends open up. Someone glances at you and senses peace. This is not an accident. This is what happens when your spiritual awakening has moved from a personal transformation to a collective impact. Your light is no longer for you alone. It's for others who are ready to rise. Carl Jung taught that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Now that you've done the inner work, facing the shadows, healing the wounds, dissolving illusions, you've shifted your frequency. People can feel that. Without knowing why, they sense that you're safe. They see something in your presence that reminds them of who they could be. And in a world where most are still asleep, your awakened state becomes a magnet for those hungry for clarity, guidance, and truth. You don't need to offer advice. Sometimes, your stillness is enough. But just as light attracts, it also reveals. And not everyone is ready for what your energy exposes. You may notice that some people suddenly distance themselves. They might become defensive, critical, even hostile. This is not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of their own unhealed parts. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the unconscious aspects of ourselves we deny or suppress. When your light meets someone else's shadow, it either inspires or threatens. And that reaction has nothing to do with your worth. This is where spiritual wisdom becomes essential. Discernment is no longer optional. It's a requirement. You must learn to tell the difference between those who are genuinely seeking light and those who simply want to feed off it. Being open-hearted does not mean being available to everyone. Your energy is sacred. Protect it. Just because someone is drawn to you doesn't mean they're ready to grow with you. Give your presence, but not your peace. Hold space, but don't lose yourself in it. A young woman once shared how she used to wonder why people always poured their souls out to her, even strangers on the train. She wasn't a healer by profession, but her spirit had matured through years of quiet endurance. One day, someone told her, "I don't know why, but I feel lighter just talking to you." That's when she realized she had become medicine just by being real. Not perfect, not loud, just a present. That's what spiritual awakening does. It turns pain into power, silence into depth, and survival into healing for others. You didn't choose this role by ego. It was chosen through your journey. You don't have to force your light. It flows naturally because you've embodied it. And now, that light is guiding others home, not through preaching, but through being. If this message speaks to your soul, say it out loud. I am a vessel of light, and those who need healing are drawn to me. I honor this calling with wisdom and grace. Sign 6. You can see through deception and illusions. You no longer fall for the lies. That's the sign. The veil has lifted, and you see through the manipulation that once controlled you. The fear-based headlines, the glamorized illusions, the hollow promises of happiness sold by society no longer seduce you. You've awakened, and with that awakening comes a piercing clarity. It's not just that you recognize deception, you feel it, sense it, and walk away from it with grace. Your spiritual awakening has trained your perception. Now, you see the intention behind the words, the energy behind the actions, and the illusion behind the mask. You no longer believe something simply because it's on the news or because someone in power says it. Your discernment is alive, sharp, grounded, and uncompromising. You understand how deeply conditioned people are to accept fear as truth and control as safety. But you've stepped outside of that. You've stopped outsourcing your thinking. You question the narrative, not out of rebellion, but because your soul refuses to live in illusion. And that discernment, that quiet, grounded knowing, has made you immune to fear. You used to get caught in the emotional chaos of others. Now, you observe it without absorbing it. You used to believe the world's definition of success, safety, and love. Now, you define those things for yourself. You can feel when something is off, even if everyone else is clapping for it. You can see through the polished appearance and straight into the energy. You've stopped being impressed by the surface and started being guided by substance. And when people try to manipulate you, you feel it in your gut. You don't need evidence. Your body tells you. Your soul speaks louder than their performance. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." And that's exactly what happened. You went inward, and the world became visible. You're no longer a puppet of culture, media, or fear. You walk in truth, and that truth keeps you steady in a world of shifting illusions. This clarity can feel isolating at times. You see things others don't. You sense energies they ignore. But this is not a burden. It's your power. You're not meant to convince others. You're meant to embody the truth so deeply that your presence itself becomes a disruption to deception. When others are triggered by your calm or your silence, it's because you remind them of a truth they've forgotten. You're not here to argue, to prove, or to explain. You're here to live aligned. That's what makes you untouchable. That's what keeps you free. You don't need to escape the world. You just no longer belong to the illusion of it. And when the world tries to pull you back into its fog, you return to your center. You return to your clarity. You return to your soul. Because once your spiritual awakening strips away illusion, there's no going back. And you wouldn't want to. If this message resonates with your spirit, subscribe and stay connected to a community that seeks truth beyond illusion. Here, we awaken, discern, and rise together in clarity. Remember, you are grounded in divine truth. No fear, no deception can shake you now. Sign 7. You feel a strong call to step into your mission. You no longer feel satisfied with what once excited you. The noise, the distractions, the things that used to fill your time now feel empty, like echoes from a version of yourself that no longer exists. This isn't apathy. This is clarity. A sacred clarity that arises after a long season of inner work, solitude, and shedding illusions. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." And you, after all the seeking, have awakened. But now, something deeper is stirring. It's not a whisper anymore. It's fierce, urgent, undeniable. You feel it in your bones, in your breath, in your spirit. You are being called. The call isn't vague. You are being pulled to teach, to heal, to lead, to build. Not because it's glamorous or profitable, but because it feels unbearable to do anything else. You are no longer able to numb this knowing. There's a shift from waiting for the sign to realizing you are the sign. Everything you've lived through, the grief, the chaos, the nights you thought you wouldn't survive, wasn't wasted. It was preparation. You didn't lose time. You were being forged. And now, that forging is complete. Now, you carry wisdom in your wounds and power in your presence. The old identity is collapsing because the new one is ready to rise. The world will still tempt you with comfort and conformity, but you've outgrown it. You've tasted something real, and nothing else will do. Carl Jung taught that healing doesn't mean becoming perfect, but becoming whole. You now understand your shadows, your patterns, your light. You are no longer fragmented. You are integrated. And that integration demands expression. This isn't the time to shrink. It's the time to step forward not with certainty, but with conviction. Think of the countless souls out there praying for a guide, a word, a sign of hope. What if that sign is you? What if your story, your voice, your truth is exactly what someone else needs to remember who they are? What if your pain, now alchemized into wisdom, is the bridge to someone else's freedom? The calling you feel isn't ego. It's a service. It's a sacred responsibility. And no, you don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to begin. Everything in your life has led to this moment. You've been initiated by experience, not theory. The universe doesn't wait for perfect people. It moves through willing vessels. Your spiritual awakening was never meant to be a destination. It was a doorway. And now that you've walked through it, the mission begins. Not someday. Not when you're more ready. Now, if this message has stirred something deep within you, declare it boldly in the comments. I accept my divine mission. I am ready to serve with purpose and power. Your calling is no accident. It's time to rise. Subscribe and join others who are awakening to their true path. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey. If something within you stirred while watching this video, trust that it wasn't random. Your awakening wasn't the end. It was the beginning of your true embodiment. Now is the time to live your wisdom, walk in your power, and become the mirror of the transformation you've already undergone. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Tap the notification bell so you never miss an upload that speaks directly to your soul. Until next time, stay aware, stay empowered, and keep using your light. How to know how many lives you have lived. 9 signs of reincarnation. The soul never thinks without a picture. Aristotle. Have you ever met someone for the first time and felt like you've known them forever? Or picked up a new skill as if you'd mastered it long ago? These are more than coincidences. They could be echoes from a life you've lived before. In today's video on spiritual wisdom, we'll explore 9 powerful signs that may reveal how many lives your soul has experienced. But more importantly, this isn't just about curiosity. It's about using that knowledge to deepen your self-awareness and evolve in the present moment. As you watch, ask yourself, what memories might my soul be carrying? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's grow together on this sacred journey. 1. Stupidity is not a lack of intelligence. It's a dangerous social phenomenon. Stupidity is not simply the absence of intelligence. It is a social and spiritual virus that infects even the brightest minds. It creeps in silently, not through ignorance, but through unawareness. What makes it terrifying is that it doesn't always look like foolishness. Sometimes it speaks with confidence. It wears a kind smile. It holds a degree, and it often believes it is doing good. This is why Dietrich Bonhoeffer warned that stupidity is more dangerous than malice. A malicious person knows they intend harm. A stupid one, however, may enforce destruction with a clean conscience, believing they're on the side of righteousness. When intelligence becomes detached from self-awareness, it no longer guarantees wisdom. In fact, intelligence without spiritual grounding can become a tool of manipulation. This is what Bonhoeffer called functional stupidity, the kind that appears competent on the surface, but is fundamentally blind to truth. It resists correction, not because it cannot understand, but because it refuses to question. Once a person has outsourced their moral compass to ideology, authority, or groupthink, they are no longer capable of discernment. They no longer think they repeat. They no longer feel they conform. Carl Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the unconscious, offers a key to understanding this phenomenon. When someone fails to individuate, they remain fragmented. They cling to external identities, roles, and rules because they haven't yet connected to their inner truth. And in doing so, they become susceptible to collective possession. Jung believed that when a person is possessed by the collective, their personal soul becomes eclipsed by archetypal forces. They may believe they are acting freely, but in truth, they have become instruments of something much darker. Unconscious conformity masquerading as morality. This is why stupidity is so difficult to treat with reason. It doesn't listen. It doesn't reflect. It doesn't feel the weight of its consequences. Facts and logic cannot penetrate it because it is rooted not in knowledge, but in identity. To challenge its beliefs is to threaten its sense of self. And so it doubles down. It hardens. It hides behind slogans, institutions, and moral superiority. It mimics virtue while dismantling truth. This is not stupidity of the mind. It is a spiritual disconnection from consciousness, a severing from one's own moral center. The spiritual cost of this disconnection is profound. When we stop thinking for ourselves, we stop hearing the voice within. We lose the ability to feel genuine empathy, to sense nuance, to respond rather than react. We fall into mechanical obedience, complying not because we believe, but because it feels safer to belong than to awaken. And in that sleep, harm is justified, tyranny is normalized, and evil advances not through monsters, but through everyday people who no longer question. To awaken from this requires courage. It demands that we reclaim our thoughts, take responsibility for our choices, and reconnect with our inner knowing. Spiritual wisdom teaches that true intelligence is not about how much we know, but how deeply we understand ourselves. It's not enough to be smart. Without awareness, without the light of discernment, intelligence becomes a weapon in the hands of shadow. The call, then, is not just to learn, but to wake up. Have you ever witnessed someone act irrationally despite being intelligent and well-meaning? Share your thoughts or experiences in the comments so we can explore this together. If this idea of dangerous stupidity is new to you, comment, "I'm waking up," to join the conversation and start seeing the world with clearer eyes. 2. Historical and psychological proof shows how ordinary people surrender moral judgment. In 1961, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted an experiment that shattered our illusions about morality. Participants were told to administer electric shocks to a person in another room whenever they gave a wrong answer. The shocks weren't real, but the participants believed they were. As the learner screamed in pain, the authority figure calmly insisted they continue. And they did. 65% of them delivered what they thought were fatal shocks, all because someone in a white lab coat told them to. These weren't monsters. These were everyday people. Teachers, clerks, neighbors just following orders. Milgram's chilling conclusion was simple. The average person is capable of inflicting great harm, not out of hatred, but because they surrender moral responsibility to authority. They obey, even when it violates their conscience. This is the kind of quiet obedience that erodes the soul. German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer saw the same dynamic unfold during the Nazi regime. He wasn't just watching soldiers. He watched intellectuals, religious leaders, even spiritual thinkers all surrender their capacity for critical thought. They weren't stupid in the traditional sense. They were educated, articulate, even wise. But Bonhoeffer identified a far more dangerous force than ignorance. He called it the power of stupidity. Not the absence of intelligence, but the absence of reflection. The absence of moral clarity when it's needed most. He warned that stupidity, in this context, is not a passive defect, but an active threat, because it thrives under pressure, under conformity, under the weight of a crowd. When people stop thinking for themselves, they become instruments of destruction, even if they mean well. And the most terrifying part is they don't even realize it's happening. This isn't just history, it's human nature. It's the reason why spiritual awakening is more important now than ever. Because awakening means reclaiming your inner compass. It means seeing through the illusion of authority, no longer outsourcing your conscience to anyone. No government, no religion, no system. As Carl Jung once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And that includes accepting our own potential for darkness when we abandon thought, when we blindly obey, when we let go of discernment. Spiritual wisdom teaches us that true awareness doesn't begin with intelligence, it begins with responsibility. The responsibility to stay conscious, especially when it's inconvenient. The responsibility to question, even when everyone else is silent. Because the real danger isn't in the loud voices of tyrants. It's in the quiet surrender of ordinary people who simply stopped thinking. If this insight into human obedience and moral surrender resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue uncovering the hidden forces that shape our choices together. 3. Functional stupidity is systemically reinforced by social, political, and economic pressures. Functional stupidity isn't just a random failure to think it's a system. And this system thrives in the modern world where groupthink is rewarded and deep thinking is punished. Dietrich Bonhoeffer warned that stupidity grows strongest in collective settings. When everyone starts conforming, challenging the norm becomes not just rare, it becomes risky. Carl Jung saw the same danger. He believed that spiritual awakening demands the courage to think for yourself, to look inward, and to resist the masks society forces you to wear. Look around the world doesn't encourage clarity. It encourages noise. Social media, with its endless scroll of slogans and outrage, thrives not on insight, but on reaction. The louder you are, the more attention you get. Political messaging is no better. It's designed to trigger, not to teach. In the workplace, exhaustion is glorified. People push through burnout, believing that being constantly busy is a sign of value. But fatigue doesn't make you sharper. It makes you compliant. When your body is tired and your mind is overwhelmed, the first thing you surrender is your critical thinking. You default to doing what's expected, not what's right. There's a story that echoes in countless offices and homes. A woman named Rachel worked for a fast-moving tech company. She was sharp, intuitive, and always asked questions that cut through the surface. But instead of being valued, her questions were labeled as disruptive. "Stop thinking so much," her manager said. "Just follow the playbook." Eventually, Rachel stopped questioning. She learned to blend in. She was promoted, praised for being efficient, but deep inside, she felt like she had betrayed herself. That's how functional stupidity works. It teaches you that success comes from silence, not insight. Carl Jung warned against this inner betrayal. When you stop thinking critically, you disconnect from your true self. You become a persona, a mask created to survive in a world that doesn't want your depth. But survival isn't the goal. Wholeness is. Jung believed that the path to transformation wasn't about pleasing the external world. It was about integrating your inner one. When you suppress your doubts, your voice, your clarity, you don't just lose your thoughts, you lose your soul. The modern world profits off your confusion. Emotional reactivity is more marketable than calm wisdom. Fear sells, outrage spreads, and in that chaos, spiritual wisdom becomes rare. People scroll, click, repeat, but they rarely reflect. They accept what feels familiar. They mimic what sounds loud. They stop asking if any of it makes sense. And slowly, functional stupidity becomes a culture one that feels normal, even when it's deeply destructive. But you are not here to fit in. You are here to wake up, to protect your clarity like a sacred flame, to step back from the noise and ask, is this truly my belief or just my programming? Because once you start thinking for yourself again, once you choose awareness over autopilot, you begin to reclaim not just your intelligence, but your integrity. And that is where real power lives. Have you ever caught yourself going along with something just because it was easier than questioning it? If so, you're not alone. Comment below. I choose to think, to break the cycle of conformity and reclaim your critical mind. Let's awaken together. 4. Modern algorithms exploit human psychology to deepen willful ignorance. Modern algorithms are no longer just tools of convenience. They are invisible architects of our thoughts. Social media platforms are designed to feed the mind what keeps it emotionally hooked, not what brings clarity. And what captures attention fastest? Anger, fear, and outrage. These systems are not interested in truth. They're engineered to exploit emotion. Content that provokes a strong reaction spreads further and faster, meaning the truth is often buried under a mountain of emotionally charged misinformation. The more something triggers you, the more likely you are to engage. And that's exactly what these platforms want. Emotional manipulation has become the currency of the digital world, while reason and reflection fall to the margins. Over time, people are pushed deeper into echo chambers where they are constantly shown what they already believe. These bubbles feel comforting, but they are intellectually suffocating. Every click, like, and scroll tightens the circle of belief, making critical thinking feel like betrayal. Questioning becomes uncomfortable. Disagreement feels dangerous. This psychological trap aligns with Carl Jung's concept of projection. We begin to cast our shadows onto others and see enemies where there are none. What once were opportunities for dialogue now become battlegrounds of identity. Without spiritual wisdom, people lose their ability to pause, to think, and to empathize. They become protectors of their biases rather than seekers of truth. What makes this even more dangerous is the rise of AI-driven systems that can manipulate behavior with chilling accuracy. Unlike the propaganda machines of the past, which used posters and speeches, today's technology watches your every move, your facial expressions, your attention span, your pauses, and builds a psychological profile to influence you without your awareness. You are not simply browsing anymore. You are being guided, shaped, and nudged toward decisions you didn't truly make. What feels like free will is often a scripted path crafted by invisible systems. This isn't science fiction. It's psychological warfare waged through convenience, notifications, and personalized content. In such an environment, spiritual awakening becomes an act of rebellion. Awakening means noticing the strings being pulled. It means turning inward to reclaim sovereignty over your thoughts, your energy, and your emotional responses. It means asking deeper questions. Whose voice is this in my mind? Why do I believe this? Who benefits from me staying afraid or angry? It is not enough to detox your body. You must detox your perception. To remain awake in a sleeping world requires discipline, discernment, and deep inner clarity. This is why spiritual wisdom is your protection. When you reconnect to your core values and your deeper awareness, you begin to see through the noise. You stop reacting blindly and start responding with intention. You no longer chase validation or jump to outrage. Instead, you cultivate stillness in a system designed for chaos. And in that stillness, you become untouchable, not because you're detached from the world, but because you're fully rooted in your truth. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights on how modern technology is shaping our minds and what you can do to stay awake in an age of manipulation. 5. Stupidity is amplified by cognitive shortcuts and evolutionary wiring. Humans are not naturally wired for accuracy. We're wired for speed. When confronted with uncertainty or fear, the brain instinctively seeks shortcuts to reduce discomfort, even if it means sacrificing truth. That's why emotionally satisfying answers are often more appealing than complex realities. This isn't a question of IQ. It's not about intelligence at all. It's about vulnerability, a social and neurological vulnerability rooted in our evolutionary design. When people feel insecure, overwhelmed, or afraid, they become far more likely to cling to simplified narratives and repeat slogans rather than confront deeper, more complicated truths. This is how stupidity spreads, not as an insult, but as a silent epidemic of unconsciousness. It thrives in moments when critical thinking feels too heavy, too exhausting. It slips in when the need for emotional relief outweighs the need for intellectual clarity. As Carl Jung warned, the greatest dangers aren't always external. They're within us quiet, unquestioned patterns of thought. The real threat is not the absence of knowledge, but the surrender of awareness. When we give up thinking for ourselves in favor of pleasing answers and group-approved ideas, we give away our freedom without even realizing it. This makes stupidity contagious. One mind, overwhelmed and seeking simplicity, influences another. And soon, groups move like herds, reacting emotionally instead of thinking independently. In these moments, belonging becomes more important than truth. Echo chambers become comforting, and the loudest, most emotionally charged voices drown out nuance, wisdom, and integrity. People aren't thinking, they're reacting, and often to the wrong things. The collective mind becomes easy to manipulate, not because people are inherently foolish, but because they've been conditioned to avoid discomfort at all costs. This is why spiritual awakening is no longer a luxury, it is a necessity. Awakening is what happens when we begin to notice these patterns within ourselves. When we realize that the search for ease, comfort, and belonging often leads us away from truth. Awakening doesn't mean having all the answers. It means being willing to question the answers you've already accepted. It means seeing clearly when you're being pulled into a narrative because it feels good, not because it's right. It means catching yourself before you give in to collective emotionalism disguised as wisdom. To awaken is to choose awareness over convenience, to pause in that tiny space between stimulus and response and say, wait, what's really going on here? As Viktor Frankl once said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose. In our choice lies our growth and our freedom. That space is where truth lives. That space is where your spiritual awakening begins. Do you see how deeply wired this really is? If this message resonates with you, declare it in the comments. I choose truth over comfort. 6. Bonhoeffer's solution, costly grace, and the daily practice of intellectual courage. Thinking independently is no longer encouraged in a world obsessed with speed, comfort, and conformity. It's inconvenient, it's slow, and often it isolates you. But as Carl Jung warned, the real danger to society isn't evil intentions, it's unconscious behavior. People don't need to be malicious to cause harm. They simply need to stop thinking, to go along with the crowd, to trade truth for approval. That's why German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer introduced the concept of costly grace, a kind of spiritual discipline that demands intellectual courage. It's not enough to believe in something. You must be willing to pay the price of awareness, to walk alone if necessary, and to hold yourself accountable to truth rather than popularity. Most people prefer cheap grace slogans over substance, certainty over curiosity. But Bonhoeffer argued that spiritual wisdom demands more. It asks us to confront ourselves daily, to engage in the painful but necessary task of thinking clearly. Carl Jung called this individuation, the slow process of becoming a whole person by integrating your unconscious mind, your fears, and even the parts of yourself you were taught to reject. This is what separates the spiritually awake from the blindly obedient. Let's bring it into modern life. Picture a young professional bombarded by trending headlines, peer opinions, and influencer rants. She notices everyone is reposting the same outrage, echoing the same perspective. But instead of joining in, she hesitates. She reads from sources she normally avoids. She questions her assumptions. She dares to say, "I'm not sure," and opens herself to learn. In doing so, she doesn't become weaker. She becomes freer. Others quietly reach out to thank her. They were silently doubting too, but felt trapped by the pressure to conform. Her courage gave them room to breathe. This is what intellectual humility looks like. It's not a weakness to say, "I don't know." It's a sign of maturity, of spiritual grounding. In a society addicted to quick takes and instant judgment, the simple act of pausing to reflect becomes a form of rebellion. To think slowly is to move consciously. To seek opposing views is to sharpen your vision, not to betray your values. You practice this by building habits that challenge your comfort zone. Read opinions that disturb you. Question your strongest beliefs. Verify facts before sharing anything, even when it supports your side. And most importantly, develop the inner strength to admit when you're unsure. These are not just acts of intellect. They are acts of spiritual awakening. Carl Jung reminds us that what we fail to face internally, we project externally. So if we don't examine our thinking, our shadows end up controlling us. Stupidity is not the absence of intelligence, it's the refusal to engage the mind and heart together. And that refusal is what turns ordinary people into unconscious participants in harm. Spiritual wisdom doesn't ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be honest. It asks you to stay awake, not to the world's noise, but to your own thoughts. And that's where transformation begins. If this message speaks to you, say it out loud. I choose costly grace. I will think for myself, even when it's hard. Then comment below to affirm your commitment. And if you're ready to grow in intellectual courage, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who dares to question. 7. Structural change is essential to restore intellectual independence. Structural change is no longer a luxury. It is a necessity if we are to reclaim our ability to think independently. In a world that constantly pushes us into survival mode, better economic policies are not just about financial relief. They are about creating the mental and emotional space for reflection, awareness, and insight. Chronic stress wears down our cognitive functions, narrowing our focus to immediate threats and robbing us of the freedom to question, create, and imagine alternatives. When people are constantly burdened by economic insecurity, their minds become trapped in loops of worry, not wonder. That is why healing begins with restructuring the environment that suffocates our mental clarity. But restructuring the outer world is only one piece of the puzzle. We are now silently governed by invisible forces, algorithms, and digital platforms that dictate not just what we consume, but what we believe. These technologies, left unchecked, shape human consciousness on a mass scale. They amplify outrage, suppress nuance, and feed us content designed to keep us hooked, not free. Demanding transparency from these systems is not just a tech issue, it is a spiritual one. Spiritual wisdom calls us to awaken from illusion, to pierce through what is manufactured, and to return to inner truth. And in a digital world curated to distract and divide, choosing discernment is a revolutionary act of self-respect. The tools we need to resist this manipulation are not just technical, they are foundational. Media literacy and critical thinking must become basic human rights. These are not elite skills reserved for academics. They are survival tools for the soul. When we fail to teach people how to think, we leave them defenseless against propaganda, fear, and conformity. The ability to ask, "Is this true?" or "Who benefits from this belief?" is the beginning of spiritual awakening. It restores our agency and reconnects us to our deepest intuition. Carl Jung reminded us that a man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. Similarly, a society that has never questioned its collective assumptions cannot claim to be conscious. Most of all, the act of thinking real thinking, not memorizing, not reacting, is a sacred responsibility. To pause before judgment, to choose clarity over comfort, to reflect rather than follow, is to reclaim the dignity of being fully human. In a time where obedience is mistaken for morality and compliance is sold as peace, the courage to think is the ultimate form of spiritual defiance. It is not enough to wake up spiritually without also waking up intellectually. The two must walk together, heart and mind aligned in service of truth. When we embrace both structural reform and inner clarity, we create a culture where consciousness is protected, not punished, where awareness is nurtured, not numbed. This is the heart of true transformation. Not just reforming systems, but reclaiming the sacred space within us, where truth, thought, and soul become one. If this message has awakened something in you, leave a comment of conviction. I believe in the power of critical thinking. I will protect my mind and demand the truth. 8. The closing challenge. Intellectual freedom requires eternal vigilance. Functional stupidity doesn't feel like foolishness. It feels like certainty. That's what makes it so dangerous. It wraps itself in confidence and conviction, creating the illusion that no further thought is necessary. People stop asking questions, not because they're incapable, but because they believe they already know enough. And in that illusion of knowing, they surrender their greatest power, the ability to think freely. This kind of mental submission can seep into institutions, communities, and even our own inner lives, where following the script becomes more comfortable than writing your own. But the heart of spiritual awakening is the refusal to go numb. It is the inner fire that says, stay awake, even when it hurts. Stay curious, even when it's inconvenient. Stay questioning, even when the answers make you an outsider. Because awakening isn't about having all the answers. It's about not abandoning the questions. It's choosing awareness over agreement, insight over instruction, and presence over passive acceptance. In a world where emotional obedience is often mistaken for virtue, to think independently is nothing short of revolutionary. True courage lies not in loud rebellion, but in quiet resistance, like the decision to pause before following the crowd, the instinct to reflect before reacting, the strength to ask why when silence would be easier. Bonhoeffer's question, "Who stands fast?" is more than a moral challenge. It is a spiritual one. Who remains rooted in truth when the world drifts into delusion? Who stays conscious when it would be safer to sleep? This is not a theoretical dilemma. It's a personal call to arms. Because spiritual wisdom is not found in knowing what's comfortable. It's found in enduring what's true. When the world rewards those who follow the path of least resistance, those who choose inner clarity over collective noise become the rare ones, the awake ones. And it is not intelligence alone that separates them. It is their refusal to give up their soul in exchange for fitting in. So the real question becomes, will you surrender your awareness for the comfort of agreement? Or will you carry the weight of consciousness, even when it costs you certainty? In the end, awakening isn't a moment. It's a decision. A decision to keep thinking, keep feeling, keep questioning, especially when no one else will. To affirm your dedication to intellectual freedom, declare your commitment. Comment below, "I will stay awake," to honor the courage it takes to keep thinking, questioning, and standing fast even when the world chooses comfort over truth. Let your words inspire others to do the same. So the next time you encounter ignorance, ask yourself, is this stupidity or obedience in disguise? Carl Jung believed that the refusal to think critically is one of the most dangerous forces in society. And perhaps the true threat isn't evil, it's unconsciousness. If this message has opened your eyes or stirred something within you, don't let it stop here. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this truth, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more deep insights into the human mind and soul. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of awakening. Until next time, stay aware, stay grounded, and stay wise.